When no becomes a complete sentence. There comes a stage in life when your tolerance levels drop so dramatically, you start wondering if you've become difficult or if you've simply stopped entertaining nonsense. Hi, I'm Lucy and welcome. Welcome back to Beautifully Unfinished. It's the podcast about holding space for women navigating change, transition, reinvention, and all the wonderfully messy bits in between. If we haven't met before, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. In the last episode, we spoke about Groundhog Day, life feeling like a paragraph on repeat. But what we didn't touch on is what happens when you decide you're no longer willing to live like that, no longer willing to live that same paragraph for what seems like a lifetime. I played the role of being everything to everyone. I'm sure you have too. The fixer, the reliable one, the strong one, the one who copes, the one who carries, the woman with many hats. Half the time not entirely sure which one I was actually wearing. And not to mention the absolute exhaustion that came with it. And then one day something shifts. Now many people like to label this phase and somewhat brush it aside with a roll of their eyes and saying, don't worry about her, she's in menopause. However you'd like to label it, menopause, menopause, midlife crisis, the house of hormones, it's perhaps all of those things. Or perhaps menopause is simply life's way of giving us the courage to say enough is enough. Because nobody really tells you this. Menopause doesn't just mess with your body. It messes with your tolerance levels. Suddenly nonsense feels louder, drama feels heavier, irritation, oh my goodness. Things that never bothered you before now feel like a personal attack. And patience? Patience quietly packs its bags and leaves the building. And it's not cruelty. It's exhaustion. It's clarity. It's survival. It's finally drawing a line in the sand. Then add to that, you spend decades of being mom, your routines, your priorities, your entire nervous system revolving around your children. And then one day, seems like overnight, they don't need you in the same way, which is wonderful. It's a quiet pat on the back that says, well done, job done. But it's also wildly disorientating because the role that defined you for so long changes. It quietly unsettles your sense of belonging, your sense of being needed. And suddenly, that life raft that you once were, you're now the one bobbing around in the ocean looking on, while everyone else seems to be cracking on with their lives without you. It's bittersweet, really, because it's actually everything you ever hoped for. Yet this new existence feels strangely unsettling, unfamiliar, and suddenly you feel like that emotional raft that you once were has started to drift away. Everyone's carrying on, and you're the one floating out there thinking, who even am I now? Your identity feels like it's gone for a ball of chalk. After much soul searching, reading, reflecting, there is one word that keeps surfacing, a word that is completely unnatural to me, and to you too, I imagine. Boundaries. And then one day you start saying, actually, no. Such a small yet profound word. It feels like betrayal the first time you try to live it. It's foreign, it's rude, it's almost selfish. It's like you're misbehaving in your own life. You find yourself looking around, feeling guilty, armed with a sea of words just to justify yourself. Because when you start putting boundaries in place, you are no longer who people are used to. And not everyone applauds your evolution. In fact, the hardest part isn't drawing boundaries. It's watching how people respond to them. Not everyone celebrates your self-preservation. Some people preferred the version of you that had no limits. Oh, and then there's the guilt. That uncomfortable knot in your stomach when you choose yourself, when you don't overextend, when you don't rescue, when you don't fix what was never yours to fix in the first place. And then comes the guilt, right on schedule without an invitation. Guilt is often the echo of old habits, the ones which taught you to put yourself last. Because something else happens with boundaries. You don't just change your behavior, you change your identity. Suddenly, you're no longer the always available one, the always agreeable one, the emotional life raft, and that can be deeply, deeply unsettling, even when it's healthy. And let's be honest, it's far easier said than done. It's a bit like knowing you shouldn't have that piece of chocolate at midnight, but you do it anyway. Or when you know that gym starts in half an hour and somehow you roll over and hit that snooze button instead. Because even when you're fully committed to this voyage of boundaries, slipping back into the old patterns, the old habits, old people-pleasing reflexes, it's a very human reality. So give yourself some grace. Adjust, recalibrate, and try again. Boundaries are so often misunderstood. They're seen as rejection, distance, coldness. But boundaries are really about pushing others away or building walls around you. They're about not abandoning yourself, having self-respect. They are kindness. Sometimes boundaries are not personal growth tools, they're survival mechanisms. A way of protecting your energy, protecting your mental stability and your peace. Because there comes a point where you simply do not have enough emotional bandwidth to keep carrying on with everyone else's expectations. And the slightly ironic part is many of us only arrive at this epiphany decades down the road. Suddenly you realize you should have perhaps paid attention because you could have lived a far more peaceful life simply by doing something a little bit different. It's that mildly irritating aha moment, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. I often find myself looking back at social gatherings, a braai at the river, parties with friends, where there were always these women you quietly envy, the ones that sat calmly, hair in place, even a little bit of lippy on, while their husbands rallied around them, offloading the car, carrying chairs, cooler boxes, handing her a drink with a satisfying tinkle of ice on the glass, starting up the braai and sorting out the meat. And then there was Lucy, sweating, exhausted, offloading the car, mascara smudged everywhere, still wearing the shirt with a suspicious blob of breakfast on it, because naturally I'd forgotten to change. Juggling the meat on the braai, trying desperately not to burn it. Standing with the men, claiming a small corner of the braai because my husband didn't like braaiing, it just wasn't his thing. And if I'd been lucky, someone else's husband stepped in and rescued me and my steak. I was always there making the salads, ensuring everyone had a chair, only to eventually find that I had to flop down into one myself and to grab the nearest drink, which was normally one of my kids' drinks, because naturally I'd forgotten mine at home. And in hindsight, my envy of those women was never because they were precious. Well, not always anyway. It was more because they had quietly put boundaries in place. Either that or they were princesses. And truthfully, of course I was envying them. But what I didn't recognize at the time, that I wasn't actually envying their lifestyle. What I was envying was their boundaries. And boundaries have this fascinating side effect. They reveal who was benefiting from your lack of them. Some relationships adjust beautifully, others resist. And I guess that tells you everything you need to know. Of course, living with boundaries is really elegant, especially in the beginning. It's awkward, you over-explain, you backtrack, you apologize too much, you say no. Then you spend the next 3 days mentally rewriting the conversation, feeling the overwhelming urge to pick up the phone and change your mind, while that internal debate going on between your ears goes on and on and on and on. But distance gives clarity. But it also plays tricks on your memory. Suddenly, you place the positives of your old life on a pedestal, forgetting the exhaustion that forced the change in the beginning. Sometimes I even find myself thinking, why did I leave in the first place? Only the good seems to echo, but deep down you know the negatives once overshadowed everything. Boundaries are not punishment, they're structure. They're clarity. They're survival. Just like with children without boundaries, you don't raise confident humans, you raise chaos. And we all remember those kids. You know the ones, the little brats? They are the ones everyone loved to have around, and they were the ones everybody avoided like the plague. Perhaps boundaries are not walls. Perhaps they are simply the shape of your self-respect. Because the new you cannot survive under the rules that shaped the old you. And with boundaries, you don't lose who you were. You finally make space for who you're becoming. And on reflection, I sometimes wonder if I knew then what I know now. In fact, oh my goodness, how did I not realize that boundaries are actually one of the greatest acts of kindness? For so long, I believed that constantly making sure everyone was okay was a form of love, was generosity, was the right thing to do. But there is nothing further from the truth, because if you have people in your life who repeatedly push your limits and you keep saying yes when you mean to say no, resentment quietly begins to build. That slow irritation that festers when you repeatedly abandon your own needs. And that helps no one, because boundaries protect others from versions of you that is depleted, frustrated, and quietly keeping the score. Let's be honest. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are kindness. Kindness delivered with clarity. Thank you so much for joining in today. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me. If this episode resonated with you in any way, I would be so grateful if you would like, follow, and subscribe. It really does help keep this podcast going and allows for these conversations to reach women who may need them most. And in fact, on that note, if you know anyone who might benefit from a gentle boundary reality check, please share this episode with them. I'll see you next week. Stay beautifully unfinished.